Welcome back, everyone. I'm Blake, founder of Team Pickleball. We're just super excited to have Roger BelAir today. I'm super excited to talk about your story. And maybe you can give us a good intro to who you are and how you got into pickleball.
Well, boy. Well, my background was really in finance. I was a banker at one time, a bean counter, and then I ended up being asked to write a book, and then ended up on the speaking career. And I discovered pickleball, Blake, about 15 years ago. And like everybody else, I just loved the game. And I was pretty good at it because in high school, when I should have been studying, I was playing a ping pong. And so I had pretty good hand-eye coordination. So it was natural for me to kind of get involved in not only playing it, but also teaching it.
Right.
And so far, I think I've taught like about 4,500 people. So
Yeah. Wow. You got the.
So I'm
practice there.
having all kinds of fun. That's what that tells you.
Right. So that transition from kind of financial banking background to pickleball, how did that happen?
Well, that's a lot more fun. Well, what happened was, I said I was a banker, and then I was fortunate enough well, I started an investment company on the side, and we ended up getting some publicity in the front cover story of Money magazine, and then I ended up writing a book, and so I had a lot of time on my hands because the investment company was fortunate enough to pay my bills.
Right.
And so, when I fell into pickleball, I just loved it, and who doesn't? I mean, so many people just, once they pick up a paddle, they just have so much fun. So that was kind of how I got involved in it 15 years ago.
That's great. Yeah, I know. I feel like once you play once, that's for the rest of your life there. Yeah.
I'll tell you this short story. I was teaching somebody last week, and she was about 60, and she was coming to one of my intermediate classes, and she says to me, Roger, she says, I think pickleball is a lot like sex. Well, that set me back a little bit. I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, for most people, when they try it once, they'll be back for more.
Nice. Yep. Well, it's
I
true.
said, whatever.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Well, okay. So you came into pickleball, and now you find yourself taking pickleball into a different setting, prisons. So how did that happen?
Well, pickleball, as you know, was created up on Bainbridge Island, and I was fortunate enough to meet one of the founders. And I, kind of back 15 years ago, it wasn't that popular. Being addicted to it, my wife and I one night are watching 60 Minutes, and Leslie Stahl had a segment on Sheriff Tom Dart, who does his best to manage Cook County Jail in Chicago. And as you can imagine, what a challenge that is. I mean, they got like 80,000 people going through there every year, standing population, maybe 8 grand. And I watched this segment, Blake, and the guys are just sitting around. I mean, they're playing cards, they're watching TV. And I said to my wife, they should be playing pickleball. They not only get exercise, but they learn life skills like learning from mistakes and thinking about consequences. And I've been married a long time, and my wife kind of raised an eyebrow and nodded her head a little bit.
Right.
But a couple of minutes later, I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to Chicago. I'll bring all the equipment. I'll pay my own expenses, and I'm going to teach pickleball to those guys.
Yeah.
Well, she did more than raise an eyebrow. She looked at me and said something like, well, your intentions are good, but don't be disappointed if you don't hear back from Sheriff Dart.
Right.
I mean, he's a busy man. He hears from a lot of kooky people. Just be disappointed. So I wrote the letter. And back then, this was 2017, he'd never heard of pickleball.
Right. Yeah.
He takes his letter, sets it off the side of his desk. But that night, what happened was he has, I think, 3 kids. He mentioned it around the dinner table. I got this letter from this guy in Seattle. Something about balls and pickles. I don't know if he's for real.
Yeah.
10-year-old daughter, I understand, puts her hands on her hips and says, Dad, I'll tell you about pickleball.
Nice.
So if it hadn't been for that little girl, we wouldn't be talking today.
That's so good. Yeah. I love that. It's very indicative of the sport too, of how it's young and old, and all the ages kind of mixed together. So I love that
Yeah.
the young girl was able to teach her dad or about, was it her dad? Yeah.
Yeah. It was her dad.
Okay. Yeah.
And he
Love that.
ran the place.
Yeah.
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 So
Cool. That's
so
great.
he had
So
one of his assistants get a hold of me, and away we go.
nice. Yeah. So you were able to make that happen, make the connections happen. So you went and kind of what happened once you took it there.
Well, first of all, I'm flying back there, and all of a sudden reality came back to me. I said, Roger, you're 70 years old. I mean, you've never been in prison before or jail. I mean, the closest I ever came, I had my car towed once because it was illegally parked.
Yeah.
And to go to some place like Cook County Jail is so intimidating.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's something like 40 acres or about the size of 70 football fields. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just plain huge
Mhm.
compared to a small town I live out near Seattle.
Yeah.
So I go through clearance, and all of a sudden I see myself standing in front of about 25 guys. Most of them are charged with either murder or attempted murder.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd just give them a little background about the sport, how it started, but with Bainbridge, Iowa, and with Joe Pritchard. Oh man, Blake, it just wasn't working. I mean, arms are crossed.
Yeah.
They're looking around the room. I couldn't even make eye contact.
Right.
And boy, I thought of my wife. I thought of my dog. I said, maybe I'll be on a plane back to Seattle tonight.
Right.
But not knowing what to do, I said, well, let's go to the court.
Yeah.
So I, tossed them a few balls and paddles, and man, I would say within 15 minutes,
Mhm.
they turned into like third graders on the playground.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they're jabbing each other in the ribs. They're having just the time of their life.
Yeah. That's great.
And I like to say within maybe an hour, 2 hours, certainly by the end of the day, I went from OG. You know what OG stands for?
Old guy.
Yeah, old guy. Yeah, I went to from old guy to either bro or dude.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, they simply loved it. Of course, they're bangers, but
Yep.
that's fine. But
Right.
because and one of the benefits is you can just imagine if you're charged with murder, guilty or innocent, how much stress you have in your life, right? And
Right.
everybody else that around you with that amount of stress, and they'll fight at the drop of a hat. But just like we all have problems, but once we get on the court,
Yep.
we don't think about our problems. We simply think about trying to hit this ball over the net.
That's so true. Yeah. I know we talked about this a lot, actually, the kind of the parallels between pickleball and therapy. And I've talked to actually a couple therapists about this. And there is something about that where it's just you lose kind of that your day-to-day worries and your all those kind of things just melt away when you're on the court because you got to be focused. It's kind of that quick interaction. And just like you're saying, like
Mhm.
it's you can pick it up easy. There's something about it too where somebody that's maybe super athletic and someone that's not can both play and they're both relatively, can obviously the athletic persons could be better, but relatively, there's still a game happening. It's not like you have to be super athletic to even get involved. So I feel like a lot of those barriers of pickleball kind of get torn down. And I feel like some of the things that you were probably seeing were probably, due to the uniqueness of the sport. But yeah, so,
Well,
they're
but
playing
see,
and
you're
what
exactly
happens?
right. But both inside and outside, and I knew one of the founders, Barney McCullough, quite
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and we can talk about that later if you like.
Yeah.
But that's really some of the key aspects about this game.
Mm.
And Barney told me more than once is this game's about community.
Yeah.
You go out in court, you introduce yourself. You have fun. There's a lot of giggling,
Yep.
and then, as you well know, then you start making all these acquaintances, which turned into friends.
Yep.
And it's really about community.
Right. No, I totally agree. So is that kind of what you were seeing inside the prisons as well?
Well, I frankly I was just a little bit overwhelmed. I mean, if you've been inside of a prison or jail like that, it's so intimidating,
Mm.
and there's no windows. I mean, it's very noisy. Um, but I just kind of did my thing, and I was seeing very positive results. And I've been back to Chicago 3 times,
Yeah.
and I told you initially what it was like. But when I walked in the second time, I felt like a rock star.
Yeah.
They were all standing up, clapping, so glad to see me.
Yeah.
And it was the same way the third time I was there. But here's what happened the third time. There was a sports reporter for USA Today
Yeah.
to write up a story for the sports page. And I thought it went well. He interviewed me. He interviewed, some of the inmates. Calls me up a couple days later and says, "Roger, I don't know how to tell you this, but well," he pauses. "It's
Yeah.
not going to be on the sports page."
Yeah.
And of course, I was back in Seattle now, and my heart rate dropped.
Yeah.
I mean, I told the nosy neighbor, I told the
Yeah.
guys at the gym,
Yeah.
they're going to think I've fabricated this whole thing. And then he kind of chuckled and he says, "Well, the editors read the story and they're going to put it on the front page."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we ended up on the front page of USA Today, and you can imagine the exposure that created.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And anybody can pull it up online, and I encourage you to.
Yeah.
All right. I encourage people to read it. But there's 2 really significant points. And a lot of us is what you'd expect. They talk to me, they talk to the other people. But the 2 things that are really significant, I think, is one is they quote a guy by the name of Jim Edmonton. And Jim's in charge of recreation back there. And he says, disciplinary problems are down.
Yeah.
Guys want to play so much that they behave themselves.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, it benefits all of us.
Right.
All right. Because you got people on edge, people angry, people with a lot of mental issues. But when you can reduce disciplinary problems, that's a real tangible benefit.
Right.
But the other thing that I want to point out is there's a picture of me sitting on the bench with a guy waiting to go in front of the judge. And as that picture's taken, he's saying to me, "Roger, look out there on the court." Well, I look out there and I see what I call S&P, which stands for swing and pray the ball goes over the net.
Yeah.
And he says, you just don't understand. You're from Seattle." "Well, explain it to me." He said, "We have 70 major gangs in Chicago, 70. They total about 100,000 members.
Wow.
They outnumber the cops 10-1.
Wow.
Before pickleball, some of these, they're the enemy.
Yep.
Some of these guys wouldn't even talk to each other.
Yeah.
And now they're out there on the court playing with and against each other and laughing."
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's huge.
That-
We know that to be true outside the prison as well. So, that's
Yeah.
cool that it also applies there too. So I love it because you took this thing and you were just going to go into the prisons. You didn't have you weren't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to tear down barriers and I'm going to make everyone discipline go down."
No.
You were just going in to have something for them to do for activity. You were like, "This is fun."
I just kind of reacted. I had a business partner for many years. He was asked once, "What's Roger going to do next?"
Yeah.
He says, "I don't know what Roger's going to do next." For that matter, Roger doesn't know what he's going to do next.
Yeah.
And this thing just really happened, Blake, as compared to being orchestrated or, I didn't have anything to do with USA Today showing up.
Right. I love that part of the story though, because you did something, but then it had a further impact than even what you expected, which is awesome. So do you think, okay, I guess maybe you can talk to that too. Obviously we can see the impact it had on the prison, the inmates. Is what impact did this have on you? Did this, this must have changed going in and seeing the people and being there and playing pickleball. That must have changed your view a little bit about just kind of the whole.
Well, it's been an incredible experience, and I've learned so much about the whole system that I knew absolutely nothing about. And I like to say that, and I think it's pretty true for all of us, we live in a bubble.
Yes.
Yeah, we live in this bubble. We have friends, and part of the reason they're friends is because they have the same values and perspective that we do. So we're in somewhat of an echo chamber. And then we have all these judgments about what other people's lives are like.
Sure.
But unless you experience some of that, you really don't know.
Yeah.
And, and that was the experience for me. And I learned so much about our criminal justice system, about how we really incarcerate more people than any other place in the world based on per 100,000 people.
Right.
I had no idea. We really believe in punishment as well as that will change somebody so they won't do it again.
Yeah.
Because if you do something wrong, you get punishment, and then if you do it again, you'll get worse punishment.
Right.
But we have a recidivism rate of like 65%. Compare that to like Norway, which is like 22%.
Yeah.
So apparently they're doing something different than we are, and they're getting better results.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think that's kind of that. Yeah. Just larger conversation there. Just, yeah. It's good though.
But that's a different topic. But what I'd like to share with you, and I think you and your viewers and listeners would find this of interest, is I'm back at Chicago. We finished the first game.
Yeah.
And, you can tell kind of where this is going with these guys. They just can't sit still. I mean, they're so excited. So I pull everybody in to the net, and I said, well, we finished our first game, and we have the winners, and we have those that came in second place.
Yep.
And one of the rules of pickleball is after the game is over, we have a group hug.
Yep.
These guys just froze.
Yeah.
I mean, they heard the words that came out of my mouth, but to give a group hug,
right?
I mean, there's no way in the world they're going to do that type of thing. These guys, many of them have been unwanted, unloved their entire life, and to give a group hug. So what I do is I reach up over the net. I encourage them to bring in and reach up too. We tap paddles, and I said, guys, that is a group hug in pickleball. It's one of the rules, and you will follow it.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yeah, and that was a reaction. Well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And where I've taught the game inside, I always teach that. They don't know any different.
Yep.
And I can tell you today, there's hundreds of guys playing the game, just say any day of the year. And after the game, they're saying, group hug everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love that little touch there. And I feel like it adds just that little, deeper, push to of that connection that we're talking about, that relational aspect of the sport, which is so unique to it. So, I love that you throw that in.
And it's very transparent what I'm trying to do is if I can get them to think about something like that as compared to hitting somebody with a fist in the mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, things are going to be a lot better.
Right. That's great. Yeah. So you are in more prisons in now, right? You've taken this to other places. How's that gone? Has that been challenging? Has that been easy?
It's been an experience, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
After that, I heard from a place in New York City called Rikers Island. And Rikers Island is for the jail for New York. They have 100,000 people that flow through there every year.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of problems. It's a very challenging place. The city council has even voted to close it down. It's just too big and unmanageable.
Yeah.
When I went there, the deputy commissioner says, this stuff works. This is really great. It's using a carrot rather than a stick. When I left, he ordered pickleball equipment for 20 courts.
Wow.
Came back to Washington State. Yeah, I mean, I think that number alone speaks to his viewpoint about how pickleball can help people on the inside.
Yeah.
just like it's helping people on the outside. All right.
Yeah.
I came back to Washington State, taught the game to several prisons, ended up in California, ended up at a place like San Quentin, who has, well, they had at the time more people on death row than any other place in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
And since that time, I've been to many prisons. I've been to, about 22 prisons or something like that.
Yeah.
But more important than that, what happened is people started reaching out to me and say, wow, this is awesome. I can see how it merely makes a difference on the inside. I got a prison a half mile away or a half hour away. I'd like to introduce it there. Will you help me? Will you tell me what to do? And Blake, my response is, I love to tell people what to do.
Right. Yeah.
So I help them step by step. Here's how you contact the prison. Here's what you send them. You send them some bio information on me. You send them some, say, Roger's gonna help me. And it's going great.
Wow.
And then we ended up from a woman with Connecticut, we co-founded a website, a nonprofit to kind of support this effort. It's called PICL. And we're Pickleball for the Incarcerated League. And now we're in, let's say, about 12 different states. We're in about 45 different prisons.
Wow.
And it's just continued to grow. I heard from 5 people last week that said, I want to get involved. They basically all have the same story.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. That's so cool. So is that kind of the main way if people want to get involved with you that they kind of go through that? Or is there other ways that people can support? Maybe if they're not going to go take pickleball into the prisons, but they want to kind of support what you guys are doing, is there a way for them to get involved in that?
Oh, sure. You know what? Obviously, we accept donations should somebody want to do that.
Yeah.
But where the real difference is made is when people say, geez, I believe in this movement, and I can see how beneficial it is. And I want to do it. And once somebody does it and they go inside and they see the benefit, they're helping these other people become better people.
Yeah.
You just have to, here's something that's, I think, key. 95% of all inmates get out. 95%. So if we can do anything to make them better people on the inside, it makes it better for all of us once they get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And pickleball does.
Yeah. And I think too, it's an interesting concept of like learning a sport that's so communal. And then hopefully maybe taking that even just as a pickleball skill with you to go find another community, pickleball community, maybe outside, could be a cool concept as well.
Well, I'm going to share a story with you here. I recently taught, last month, I was at 6 different prisons in California. California has the second largest inmate population in the country behind Texas. And it's going statewide.
Sure.
But I was talking to the head of recreation out of headquarters. And she said something like, as great as pickleball is on the inside, I think it's even better once they get out. And my initial reaction was, really? I mean, explain that to me.
Right.
And she says, Roger, our recidivism rate in this country is an embarrassment. It's like 65%. And you look at other countries of the world, and I threw out that number about Norway of 22%. So we're trying to learn from them, and we're trying to implement some of the things that they do so that we can reduce recidivism rate.
Yeah.
And what we've learned is 3 things are needed for a guy to get out and stay out. And I say a guy because 90% of all inmates are men.
Sure.
First of all, they need a job. They need income.
Yep.
But statistically, about half of all ex-inmates are still looking for work a year after they get out.
Yeah.
Okay? You can understand that. Second of all, they need support. Now, normally support comes in the form of family, but it's not going to be any surprise to learn that many families are just as messed up as the inmate, right?
Yeah.
And so you do what you can there. Here's the third thing they need, and that's community.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo for pickleball.
Yeah.
Right? Because here's a way that they can grab a paddle, a $25 paddle, go down to the local court,
Yep.
make new friends, stay away from maybe some of the gang members that they were involved with before, develop relationships, and it'll help acclimate them to the new world that they've been missing out on for a few years.
Yeah. I think that's huge. Yeah. It's filling in those gaps, like you're saying. But yeah, I think just even I've been down there sometimes. I've forgotten a paddle or whatever, and people are so ready to just, oh, here's a paddle. What do you need? Here's a ball. Let me teach you. So I love just
Right.
it's so just welcoming, I feel like, for the most part. And so I love that skill just also applies. Obviously there's other deeper things they're probably learning there. Just with playing a sport, that you would with a sport. But I think taking just the skill of pickleball out as well is super cool to hear that's been impactful.
Well, I mentioned Barney McComb a few minutes ago, and
yeah,
I like to say friendships are found rather than made. You could sit next to somebody for 20 years and not be close to them, and you could run into somebody at a party and just click.
Yep.
And that's what happened to Barney and myself.
Mm-hmm.
That we just really related well, and I'd see him maybe once a month.
Yeah.
And he shared with me more than once. He says, pickleball is about community.
Yeah.
It's the most social sport ever created. And you think about it, anybody that plays, they go out, they play, they go to the sidelines to wait to get in again. And there's no other sport quite like it. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason that when Barney and Joel created this sport, and also Bill, that they thought it was going to be very successful. Mm. But what they did is they went to Spalding, Wilson, etc., and tried to promote the game.
Yeah.
And the answer came back as, well, you got a $4 wooden paddle, you got a 50-cent ball.
Yeah.
There's no money to be made. Right?
Yeah.
And so they formed Pickleball Inc. in 1972 to promote the game, but nothing really happened until baby boomers started retiring about, after the turn of the century. And then they would go to Arizona, Florida, and then they started bringing the game north.
Yeah. No, it's, I remember playing growing up, but even my aunt has a pickleball court in her backyard. So, it was around, but it was never something you really thought too hard about. And then all of a sudden, people started taking it seriously, and it was like, oh wow,
it's everywhere.
This is fun, So it's super exciting.
Were you playing in high school or junior high? Is that where you're playing?
Yeah. Just casually, right? Like you go to a camp and there's a pickleball court and you play there, or obviously like my aunt had a court in her backyard, but
sure. Pickleball PE teachers picked up the sport a little bit.
Yeah.
For the same reasons that Spalding and Wilson rejected it. In other words, it was really cheap. So Barney told me if it hadn't been for PE teachers, the sport would have died.
That's super interesting. Yeah. Because it's like exactly what they need, right? Easy.
Right. Well, they don't have any money.
Yeah. That's great. Love it. I feel like pickleball is just such a interesting, the way it came about, and just the sport, and just like, it's so unlike everything else that we see out there. So it's a breath of fresh air for sure. So, well, thanks for jumping on here. It was great chatting with you. Is there anything you want to leave people with? Kind of final thoughts?
Well, I'd like to leave my email address so that if anybody has any questions about what we're doing, or anything at all, and they can reach out to me. That's the best way to contact me. Okay. And it's my last name with an extra R, so it's BELAIRR@gmail.com.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, you can also look up the what was it called again? The Incarcerated League.
Yeah, it's PICL is the name of it, but the website is PICLEA League, LEAGUE.com or .org. Excuse me. Yep.
I'll definitely put this below. So if you guys are interested, make sure to click the links below, and we'll definitely make sure to include those. But thank you so much, Roger, for jumping on. That was super great chatting with you, and I'm sure we'll stay in touch.